Hello everyone, welcome to a very special edition of Dayspring Discussions. I'm your host, Sean McGahee, and this is a show where we talk about movies, TV, sci-fi, fantasy, comic books. If you geek out about it, we're going to talk about it. Now today, I am flying solo, that's right. Nor Lisa, nor Josh, nor anyone else could make it. They're all a little busy. I tried to get them here, but just did not accomplish it, but that's okay, because there's something we need to talk about, so we had to do a show today, and I think you all know what it is. It's Wonder Woman. That's right. The film came out this weekend that many have been looking forward to for quite a long time. And many, like myself, have kind of been holding their breath, hoping that it does well and course corrects the DC universe a little bit. And I think, judging from critic and fan response, we can all say that we were all surprisingly satisfied. I went on Friday night along with Lisa to go see it, and I gotta say, I liked it. Not only did I like it, I think it's exactly what the DC Cinematic Universe needed to get back on track and to get people excited for Justice League that comes out in November. Now, guys, normally in this format, as you know, usually run over some Marvel, then I go to DC News, Star Wars, Harry Potter, etc. But since Wonder Woman is the number one thing on everyone's mind, probably the number one thing that you're going to tune into this podcast for, I thought I'm going to start off with that. I'm going to go off a little bit. I might go ramble even. That tends to happen when I'm by myself on these episodes. So I'll start off with Wonder Woman. If I have enough time, I'll get to other subjects. But from what I've been thinking in my head this morning about what I want to say, I doubt there's going to be any, but we'll see if we get to it. I'll start off with Wonder Woman. If I get to other things, I'll get there. If not, we can always save it for next week's episode, where hopefully by then I'll have a co-host and the podcast will be a little better, because I'm not a big fan of doing these things by myself. I like the back and forth. I like the conversation, the discussion, if you will. But this is something that I really want to talk about, because it seems like lately, when there is big movies that come out, I don't have the time for me and Lisa to sit down and talk about it. I mean, when Guardians of the Galaxy 2 Volume 2 came out, I wanted to do a review right away, within the next day or so, and just going to get the time to do that. Eventually, we talked about it on the show, like maybe several days to 5-6 days later. And the same thing with Wonder Woman here. We went and saw it Friday night, Lisa and I. I wanted to do a review either Saturday or Sunday. We didn't get a chance to do it. Tuesday is a normal show day, so I thought we could talk about it then, but then Lisa had to work. Josh hasn't seen it yet, surprise, and it's just, it was just all a mess. And I hate that these are things that I want to talk about, but I don't have time for a co-host to come talk about them, so I got to go it alone, Sometimes the hero's journey has to be walked alone, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Now, I might get lost along the way. I might go off on a tangent or something like that. Just bear with me. And then, of course, you guys fire back on social media and the Gmail account. Let me know what you thought, and we'll really get this conversation going. So just to start off, I wanted to talk a little bit about the lineage or the history leading up to this film, both from a Warner Brothers and DC standpoint, but also from the production standpoint as that. The last film that Warner Brothers came out within their DC Cinematic Universe was Suicide Squad. Before that, Batman v Superman, and then, of course, kicking off with Man of Steel. As far as Wonder Woman goes, we've had the classic 1970s Wonder Woman show starring Linda Carter, which is kind of the pinnacle or the standard most people have for Wonder Woman in their minds. There was a 2011 pilot that was made with Adriana Paletsky, is that her name? The girl from Friday Night Lights. The pilot was made. It was never aired. The show was never picked up, so we never got that. But we have gotten Wonder Woman quite a bit in animated form. There was the 2009 animated movie, which was quite well done, where Kerry Russell voiced her. And then you have the Justice League animated series that was done quite well, too. I definitely recommend checking that out on Netflix. From a history standpoint, everyone knew what the stakes were of this film. Starting off, DC, they have tried several times to kind of kick off a cinematic universe. Their real first attempt, I felt like, was with Green Lantern. I think that was 2011, 2010, something like that, starring Ryan Reynolds. and didn't go so well. The film was not well reviewed and kind of flooded a little bit. Then you had Man of Steel coming out in 2013, and again, it was their push to make a DC cinematic expanded universe. Personally, I didn't like Man of Steel. I'm a big Superman fan. It wasn't to do with the acting. It had to do with some of the choices and characters and some of the story. The plot of the film was kind of my problem with that film. Moving on from there, Batman v Superman, going off of Man of Steel and making a pseudo sequel to that, I don't think it was a good starting point, and I was very doubtful of Batman v Superman, aside from the casting of Ben Affleck as Batman, which a lot of people hated on. Go back, check my blog. I was on board from the get-go, so there's that. But giving Batman v Superman the next film after your first introduction to this world, not to mention you're throwing in Wonder Woman, you're throwing in Doomsday, all this stuff, it was too much. It was too much, and the theatrical version, I agree, was horrible. I do not like the theatrical version of Batman v Superman, but the ultimate cut of Batman v Superman was great. When I first saw that, the word that came to mind was epic. I recommend that film. I recommend never seeing the Batman v Superman theatrical cut, though. You can basically tell that Warner Brothers executives hijacked the film that Zack Snyder was trying to make. So instead of making it a well-balanced Batman and Superman film, they literally just tried to make it a Batman film, because all those deleted scenes, 30 minutes worth of deleted stuff, was all Superman / Clark Kent stuff. So you could tell that the Warner Bros. Executives were trying to make a Batman film, not Batman v Superman. And then they threw in Wonder Woman. The casting of Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman has been very controversial, because when people first heard it, they're like, what? This is the most iconic female superheroine ever, right? I mean, she's the standard, of which, kind of like with Superman, that's, what everyone looks up to because they're strong and brave and good. And she was such an example for female characters. And to take this former Israeli, what is she, model, and now turned actress, who really from that point, I don't think could act her way out of a paper bag, just being honest. It was stunning. I thought it was the wrong choice. A lot of people did. In Batman v Superman, we got a good sample of what she was going to be like physically. She didn't have a lot of lines, so that was, still up in the air. She definitely looked the part. She looked cool doing the action sequences, but as far as her acting, her carrying a film, that was still up for grabs. So Batman v Superman, critically panned. In the box office, I think it did, what did it do? Almost like $800 million, I think, or so. Not what Warner Brothers expected, and not what they should have gotten, because out of the 5 most recognizable symbols in the world, 2 of them are the Batman and Superman symbol. So you're telling me that 2 of the most popular characters, or the two most popular fictional characters, couldn't bring in $1 billion? I mean, these days, a crappy Transformer movie brings in $1 billion, and you can't get the 2 biggest superheroes in one movie to break $1 billion? I'm sorry, but that, to me, seems like a failure. It really does. I know the film made money, but to me, that seems like a failure. Coming in on Suicide Squad, David Ayer, who directed Fury, which I really like that movie, and I was hopeful because they got David Ayer for this film. I was not excited for a Suicide Squad movie because it's about the bad guys and they're anti-heroes and blah, 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 blah. I'm not that type of guy. I don't like those type of movies. From what I hear, kind of the same thing happened to him that happened to the director of Fantastic Four, Josh Trank is his name, I think. I think that's his name. Basically, the studio hijacked the film from him. From what I hear, the director's cut, or the original cut, of Suicide Squad was different, darker, not quite as funny. But when the bad reviews of Batman v Superman came out, they kind of changed the film a little bit, tried to make it a little more lighthearted or something. Something happened, but all I got was a giant music video where they were blatantly trying to, play into like a Guardians of the Galaxy vibe, and it didn't work for me. I didn't like the film I caught it a couple weeks ago on HBO, the last 25 minutes, and I'm just like, yeah, this film is not good, definitely. So up to this point, Man of Steel has been, half and half as far as people that like that film. Batman v Superman theatrical cut, not a lot of people liked. Suicide Squad was seen as a failure as well. So this mounts a lot of pressure on Warner Brothers and Wonder Woman to really just, pick it up, because if Wonder Woman was not good or was not received well, I definitely would have thought they would have halted production on everything they were doing and, said, okay, let's scrap it and let's start new. I'm sure we would have gotten Justice League still, but I think they would have changed something to where Flash could have rewritten time or something along those lines. But here we are. Patty Jenkins, who has not directed an actual film since 2003, which was Monster, which got Charlize Theron an Oscar award, steps in and knocks it out of the park. Let's be honest here. Oh, I'm getting a text. Anyway, Patty Jenkins, I will give her so much credit for this film. It was, a film lives and breathes by the director, and some of the films, especially the ones in the past for the DC universe, after I saw the ultimate cut of Batman v Superman, I gave Zack Snyder a break because I saw what he was trying to do, and I applaud him for it. But of course, again, the studio took over, I felt, that film. Same with David Ayer. I know David Ayer's potential. I saw Fury. I saw other films of his. I know what he's capable of. And again, I felt like the studio took over the film. With Patty Jenkins, the fact that she hasn't directed a movie in a long time means A, she had a vision for the character, for the film, and B, she probably wouldn't have signed on unless she got some kind of guarantee that Warner Brothers was going to let her do what she wanted with the film. And that definitely shows. One of the smartest things I think she and Warner Brothers did for this film too was take a great supporting cast and surround your main actor, much like they did in the original Christopher Reeve Superman movie. Christopher Reeve was a relative unknown until, Superman. But what they did was, for that film, was they surrounded him with known actors and great actors to help support the film, such as Marlon Brando and Gene Hackman. And it turned out great. Christopher Reeve, of course, knocked it out of the park, and that's kind of felt the same thing they did here. I got a very similar vibe with this as well, a very uplifting vibe for this film, much like I do when I watch the original Superman film starring Christopher Reeves. So here we are, Tuesday. The film's been out for 5 days now, and it made over $100 million in its opening weekend. A lot of people at first were projecting $65 million, given the track record and how the other DC films had been portrayed. But with this film, they let the critics, of course, at first they weren't going to let the critics, I guess, give their reviews till like the day beforehand, but after they got positive buzz about it, they allowed them to release it, I believe, like 4 or 5 days beforehand. So that really helped, I think, jump up that projection number and make it hit just over $100 million, which is great. It's great for a film like this to do it, given what it was going against with the previous DC films. And the fact that, of course, it's Wonder Woman. It's the first big, not only superhero female-led film. Well, it's obviously not the first one, but it's, in reality, we can all just forget about Catwoman and all those other ones just for a sec. But also it was directed by a woman too, Patty Jenkins. And the all this stuff that was surrounding it, with the bad reviews of other DC films, the fact that it was a female superhero finally, the fact that it was a female director, it was a whirlwind that all culminated in this, what I want to say, perfect storm. This film was going to make or break a lot of things in regards to Warner Brothers and the superhero genre, and again, it crushed it. It literally crushed it. Now, I'm giving this high praise. It does have some flaws. I mean, I'm not saying it's one of my top 5 superhero films of all time. It's not. It's good, but it's not in there. In fact, I might go through in the next few days and make out a list and see where it falls, and we'll go from there. I'm hoping to see the film again today. Planning maybe do it tonight. I've only seen it once. I usually like to see a film twice before I review it, but again, I wanted to get this review out because some people have been asking me what I thought about the film, and I couldn't go into much detail, so I wanted to get this out. And like I said, I'll go see the film again for a second time and go from there. So I guess to start off, I want to start at the very beginning of the film, which is the DC logo. Now, in the past, they've had the punches and the sound effects DC logo that comes around, which I thought was fine. I like this fine one. Marvel Studios recently changed their logo to where it's a little more detailed and include clips from their previous films, and then it all culminations in the Marvel Studio logo. DC, of course, in the shadow of Marvel Studios, has to, step up their game as well, so they make their own logo. Now, granted, they've only had 3 other films before Wonder Woman, so instead of taking clips from their other movies, they took CGI animation of Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, etc., and then they culminated as one big shot of like the entire DC universe, and then they put the DC logo on there. 2 things about that. First off, there's no way in hell they would have done that if Marvel hadn't changed their logo. I mean, of course, DC is always going to be in the shadow of Marvel Studios until they get a couple successful films under their belt. That's just the way it is. Plus, Marvel's the first one to do the cinematic universe successfully. All these other studios, Universal and Sony and all that, they're all trying to make their own cinematic universe ever since they saw Avengers and saw the kind of money they could make off a cinematic universe. And DC is no different. DC and Marvel have been compared to each other for decades. They're the 2 big comic book companies, the 2 big superhero groups, so they're going to be compared to each other till the end of time. And unfortunately, when it comes to movies, Marvel's kicked their butt. I mean, granted, you had back in the day, you had your Batman with Michael Keaton and Tim Burton. You had your Christopher Reeve Superman movies. And that's when, you had crappy Marvel movies. It was kind of a touch and go. But now we're living in the age where Marvel is setting the standard and DC is just trying to catch up. When in fact, they really shouldn't even just catch up. I mean, that's kind of the problem I had with Batman v Superman. It felt like they were trying to jam so much in there to try to catch up to Marvel. Don't. Just, play your own game. Go your own pace, and you'll be fine. Now, another thing about the logo is it felt very reminiscent to the old Justice League animated series opening. If you go back and look at the Justice League animated series, the opening to that was basically CGI version introductions of each character. You had, I think it was Superman punched through a wall, Batman threw a batarang, Green Lantern was shining his lantern, Flash was running. And guess what? That's exactly what we got with this new DC intro. So it's not even that original, I'm sorry, but it's not. It's literally just a rip-off idea of the Justice League animated intro. So there's that. Another thing that I found interesting, of course, they included all the main characters that they've talked about for coming out with films, such as, of course, you had Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. Then you saw Flash, Cyborg, Green Lantern, and Aquaman. I found it interesting, of course, that Aquaman looked like Aquaman in the comics and not what Jason Momoa is going to look like in the Justice League and Aquaman film. Found that interesting. The whole logo, again, I don't mind it. I thought it was, to introduce the characters, it was okay. But it looked like something that somebody who was, thrown together within like a couple of days or a couple of weeks and just boom, taken in no consideration. It was going to be at the beginning of every DC action film, and the action films or live action films look totally different from what the characters or the vibe is from the logo. I don't know. That's just me, just, a little commenting on the logo. Okay, so getting into the film itself. The biggest worry I know I had and many people had was Gal Gadot. Lisa always gets me when I say that wrong. If she listens to this, she's going to get me for saying it wrong too, but she never listens when she's not on the show. So there's that. Anyway, Gal Gadot was the biggest worry for this film, and I thought she did okay. I didn't think she did phenomenal, but she did a lot hell better than I thought she was going to do. She carried the film well because being the main character of this movie, it doesn't work unless you feel for the main character. And there were definitely times in this film where I felt for her. Of course, we're running spoilers, guys, so if you haven't seen the film, pause it, come back, and then listen beyond this point. So the 2 points in this film where I really felt the tension and got that sensation was No Man's Land. When Steve was telling Diana, no, you can't go out there. No man goes out there. It's a dead zone. We got to stay on mission. We can't help these people. And Diana's like, I can. And she steps up off that ladder. It was a great moment, probably one of the best moments in the film where she truly becomes Wonder Woman. The other feel moment for me was at the end when Steve, spoiler again, of course, Steve sacrifices himself, and Diana feels that moment. She feels the hurt. So, that kind of embraces her. But then, of course, just as she's about to kill Dr. Poison, she has to remember what she learned from her experiences and what she learned from Steve. And just, the culmination of it all. Because really what this film's message was, and another thing I loved it so much, was it did have a hopeful message, but it had a message about life and humanity in general. Diana, being a very fish out of water character, being naive, she thought the whole reason this war was going on was because of Ares, because Ares is evil and he's making these men do bad things. So if she killed Ares, the men would stop doing bad things and they'd be good men again. That's not the case. Throughout the course of the film, Diana goes on her hero's journey and learns that men are men, and some are good, some are bad. They're a complexity of both. And whether they're worth saving because of that, because they do bad things, if they're still worth saving, is kind of a decision she had to make for herself. Just that journey and that kind of message was great. I loved having that in the film. Very good message, and it wasn't hammered into you. The only thing was a downside of the film. Okay, I felt like that last monologue towards the end there, it was kind of hammered into you a little bit. There was that line where it's like, oh, what is it? Love is what it's all about. It was just like, okay, the message we got, it's okay. But to have it kind of hammered into us like that, we get it. You didn't have to literally spell it out for us. We got it throughout the film. But sticking with Gal Gadot, I thought she did a great job of playing that kind of naive character who was on the journey of realizing and learning about humanity. And there, again, a lot of good messages in this film. People were very much aware that it was going to be tried to think of it as a feminist kind of film, I guess, where it was empowering women and all that. And then some people also criticizing it that it's a female character, but she's still good looking and strong and blah. I'm not trying to look at it like that. Okay, you can call this a big step because it is a female strong character. I was looking at her as just a character. Granted, throughout the film, there were little sprinkles of people kept underestimating her and questioning her because she was a woman, but she came from a land of all women, so everyone was equal. No one looked at each other differently because there was only one gender. So when she steps into London or the real world, people, at that time, women weren't allowed in big important meetings. They weren't allowed on the battlefield. It was a different world than what she came from. So again, the fish out of water story, and she kind of had to Steve had to try to adjust her to that or make her understand how the world works. But the thing I liked is because she didn't care how it worked. She walked into that meeting and me, I hate war, I hate guns. When she walked into that meeting, she was talking to those people. It was like, you're a general, you should be out there on the front lines with your people, much like the Amazonians. Her mother was out there fighting with her people on the beach when the Germans invaded. That's my mentality when it comes to war. But then again, I've never been in a war. I've never been in a battlefield. But I'm saying if you're going to make decisions that are going to get people killed, you damn sure better be out there reaping the consequences along with your men. Okay, so I think I covered Gadot. She's, did a fine job, and I think a lot of people are now more looking forward to her in Justice League than they were. Moving on to the other star, Chris Pine. So Pine, of course, I'm a fan of his. When they first said that he was actually going to be cast in a DC film, or they were looking to cast him in a DC film, everyone thought about Green Lantern as Hal Jordan. And immediately, that's what I thought of. That's where I thought he would be the best used for this cinematic universe. Because if you look at the Star Trek films, the way he plays Captain Kirk is exactly what Hal Jordan is. His character is almost exactly the same as James T. Kirk in the current Star Trek films. So I thought it'd be a great transition. He's a good actor. I've seen him do good things. Just watch Hell or High Water and you'll see just how good of an actor this guy really is. So I thought it was the best way to utilize him. And then I hear he's being cast as Steve Trevor in this film set during World War I. And so that's when I knew. I'm like, okay, he's World War I. He's not going to be in other films. I was a little disappointed because that means, it's a waste of a good actor, I guess, in my opinion, is what I'm trying to say. But the way he was used, again, giving Gadot that great support system means giving her a good actor to play off of, a male lead to play off of, and I think Pine did a great job. He was this character that was very relatable, very likable, and his ideas of trying to teach Diana about the world and their conversations about how humanity works and the complexities of it were just great. I really liked it a lot. His sacrifice at the end, I thought, worked very well. Of course, at this point, I could go into the similarities between this and the movie Captain America: First Avenger. Starting off, there's no way this film would have been set in World War I or any previous time, like period piece, if Captain America: The First Avenger wasn't perceived as well done. If that, period piece during World War II did not go well, there's no way they would have even considered doing a Wonder Woman movie in the past. Another thing, of course, in this film is you got a guy named Steve flying a plane essentially to his death. Now, there have been rumors, of course, that they're thinking about bringing Chris Pine back for a sequel, which, by the way, Patty Jenkins is contracted to come back for a sequel, and I think we're all very happy about that. The problem I have is if trying to bring Chris Pine back, or Steve Trevor, the character, back, is one, I hope it's just going to be in flashbacks, because if you actually do bring the character back, whether it be through time travel or, regeneration or whatever, it's going to sully that meaning at the end of Wonder Woman. Like, if you bring the character back, you're doing what people criticize Marvel for, which is killing the character off and then immediately bring him back, which their death really means nothing. Much like in the Avengers, where you have Coulson, who sacrifices himself in that film to bring the Avengers together, really, to give them a unifying purpose. But then the character lives on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Yet another reason why I don't watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Because in my mind, in a lot of people's mind, Agent Coulson is still dead. And should be, to really signify that there is a cost to these battles. In Age of Ultron, we got Quicksilver dead. Winter Soldier, we knew that Nick Fury was going to come back. It was Nick Fury and it was Samuel Jackson. I knew from the get-go he wasn't fully dead. That's no shocker there. But you got to leave these characters dead. Otherwise, if you bring them back and bring them back quickly, their death means less. And that's what they do in comic books. I hate that they've done that in comic books where they kill a character like, say, the Human Torch. Human Torch was barely dead. I swear. It's like one issue he died, and as soon as he came back the next issue, I was like, that's ridiculous. Barry Allen, The Flash, he was out of comics for about 20 years, okay? Superman, at least they gave him, several months in that. But like in comics, the deaths are starting to mean less. Same thing in the Marvel Universe. I don't want that to go to the DC Universe. We already know that Superman's coming back. Not only is he Superman, but also we've seen him in promotions for Justice League. So how, you can look at Batman v Superman in theaters knowing that when Superman kills himself, you've already seen pictures of him in Justice League Promotions, you know him dying at the end of the film means nothing because he's coming back in his next movie. So yeah, so I guess what I'm trying to say is Steve Trevor, his death, we can't bring him back in any way, whether it be, regeneration or whatever, because then it's going to kind of sully the ending of Wonder Woman. So another thing I want to comment, of course, the comparison between this and the first Avenger is I'm going to mention this. Okay, so the guys over the Long Box Sessions, I just listened to their review, and they were talking about that scene where Diana and Steve hook up. They kiss, they go up to the bedroom, you close the door, and you're assuming, of course, they get nasty with it. And they're like, why do we need that? They felt like it kind of sullied the feminist message of the film, I guess. I don't know what that means. But my response to them was simply this, okay? They did it because the first Avenger did not do it, okay? Steve Rogers, Captain America, went down in the ice, assumably to his death, without ever truly hooking up with Peggy Carter, the love interest. Another strong character, very much comparable to Steve Trevor, in the supporting role in this film too. So I think, I myself has complained that, Captain America essentially is still a virgin. He never got hooked up with any girls before he was Captain America. While he was Captain America, he had a thing for Peggy, who he never hooked up with, went down in the ice, came out, and as far as we know, didn't have anybody else until, he started showing interest in Peggy's niece, Sharon. So as far as we know, Captain America is still a virgin. Now, you could, the most, where my mind wanders to this as well is, okay, she got it off Steve Trevor. Did she get pregnant? Is there a child? That's something you could go off on, but I don't think they're going to do that in the DC universe. That's, someplace they won't take it. I guess what the boys of the Long Box Session were trying to say is that she didn't have to hook up with Steve to still, make the story work, make their love story work, much like, I guess, you could say the first Avenger did. I think there's just a lot of comparisons. The fact that they were both set during World Wars. There, I got it right. But I like the fact that this one also was set during World War One. Now, something that's been talked about as well since the film came out was, yes, Patty Jenkins is signed on to do a sequel, and they've kind of talked about the sequel being set in a modern time, like today. I think that would be a mistake because this film ends with almost 100 years left to go before we meet Wonder Woman in Batman v Superman. That's a lot of time period piece. What was she doing for those 100 years? Yeah, she was living amongst us. Did she go back to Themyscira? Were there other things for her to do? Was she fighting other gods? Which, again, to go off on this a little bit, when this film came up, I knew Wonder Woman's mythology or her history was set in Greek mythology and the Greek gods. And I was curious how they were going to play with the gods being real in a world where, they had set up in Man of Steel and Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad, where they tried to make it, I guess, believable as possible. The idea of Greek gods doesn't really go, mesh too well in the world of believability. And what they did when Diana's mom was explaining it to her is that all the gods ended up fighting Ares, and Ares pretty much ended up killing all the gods. So right there, boom, that knocks him out. And then at the end of this film, Diana essentially kills Ares. So boom, you take out the idea of Greek gods living in this world and you just completely threw it out. I think honestly it's a bit of a mistake, but that's just my personal choice. I can see how, from a story's perspective, it makes things a little easier to where you don't have to reference it in other DC films. You got other bigger issues to deal with, such as aliens and Atlanteans and all that stuff. So the last thing you need is to deal with the idea of gods. Touching on that a little bit, also, I've talked in here several times about the origins of Wonder Woman. Now, as I've said, I'm not a big Wonder Woman fan, but I absolutely love the New 52 run on Wonder Woman, kind of the first run of Wonder Woman that I actually got into. And then the day before, on Thursday, before I saw the film, I went and I picked up from the library the latest two interpretations of her origin story, which was Wonder Woman Year One, and then was The Legend of Wonder Woman Volume 1 Origins. And I read both of those on Thursday to kind of see how true they were going to stay to the mythology of the character. And in The Legend of Wonder Woman, there was a part where young Diana was trained by, what's her name? Antelope, Robin Wright's character, and that was in the book as well. So they did a pretty good job of staying true to that. They talked about in the film where she was made by clay and brought to life by Zeus, so they talked about that. And then, of course, we learn later on that Ares reveals that she's actually was created by Zeus. So essentially, her and Ares were siblings, I guess if you call it that. So going off her origin a little bit, in this film too, they said that, of course, she had no father, she was made by clay, but then you come to find out that Ares reveals that she was actually made by Zeus. So in the New 52 storyline, they revealed, I guess, or created that she was actually the result of Zeus's infidelity with her mother, and that the reason they kept this hidden was to protect her from Zeus's wife Hera, who, you know, after she found out, tried to kill Diana and all the other children of Zeus. In the Year One storyline, they really didn't get into Diana's heritage. Like, they talked about how she was the daughter, she was an Amazon, and they were immortal, and once they stepped off the island, she was no longer immortal, but her powers came in this recent interpretation from the gods gifting her powers. Like, one god gave her the power of flight, the other one gave her the power of strength, all that stuff. They were a gift from the gods, not something she got from being a demigod. So going forward, I'm not sure if they're going to play off the fact that she's a daughter of Zeus and that her mother is still her mother, or if they're going to play just the fact that Zeus created her as the god killer, quote unquote, just as, making her out of clay, but then creating her to be the thing that finally stops Ares. Okay, speaking of the villains, let's get into them just a little bit. We had Danny Hudson playing Ludendorff, that's how it is. Hey, see, I finally get it when it's right in front of me. That character and, what was it, Dr. Poison was her name. They were pretty clean cut and dry villains. They were the main villains of this film, and they didn't have a lot of depth, to be honest. I'm still curious exactly what that chemical was that Ludendorff was breathing in that made him strong, but it was all a device to try to trick the audience and, of course, Diana into thinking that he was Ares and that is who she needed to kill. About halfway through the film, actually it was right after Sir Patrick was introduced, I leaned over to Lisa as we were sitting there, and I looked at her and I was like, Lupin is Ares. And I call him Lupin, of course, because he played Lupin in Harry Potter, and that's what Lisa and I know him from. And for me, it's about the same reason I never watched like detective stories. It's not because, I don't think they're good. A lot of it has to do with the fact that I can figure it out in 10 minutes who the villain is or who the murderer is. It's not because I'm some brilliant detective myself. Far from it. It's the fact that I've watched so many goddamn TV and movies that I can tell the story beats. I know the story beats. I know what a writer is trying to create and the path they're trying to go, to where I can tell who the villain is. I used to watch the show Bones all the time with Lisa, and halfway through the episode I could always tell who the murderer was, because guess what? It's the person they're trying to least suspect as the murderer. And in this film, who was the person least likely to be the god of war? Well, it's the frail guy who you think is on their side leading the allies. Of course, it was obvious. This goes back to the whole how they handle the Greek mythology in the DCEU, I was a little pointed that she killed Ares, because I would like to see how these characters deal with Superman, Batman, stuff like that. And again, it's just my disappointment. He's a god. He's not easily killed, but then Diana's a god too, so I can see why she can kill him. And this whole fight, I think, went a little too quickly. Another kind of gripe I had about the film was that last fight felt so stereotypical and quick, and it just, it was okay, but given the quality of the film up until that point, I felt like it should have been a little better, I think. But again, just my personal opinion. While I'm on my gripes as well, probably one of my biggest gripes about the film is the CGI. There are several points in this film where you can tell the CGI or the special effects weren't quite done yet. It looks like they were rushed. The biggest thing, the one that I noticed most that took me out of the film, was at the beginning on the fight in the beach when what's her name? Hippolyta. I can never say her name right. I'm gonna try to. Hippolyta. That's how it sounds. Anyway, Diana's mom. Yes, we'll call her Diana's mom. She jumps off her horse and hits that soldier. You could tell total CG. It looked honestly bad, in my opinion. And there were a few other points in the film where the CGI didn't quite look right. Didn't look like it was done. But it didn't take me out of it as much. That one with Diana's mom, that one took me out of the film just for a second. So, again, not a big thing, but they were obviously in a time crunch to hit their deadline and couldn't get a few things right. Okay, going back to the villains, I guess you could talk a little bit more about Dr. Poison, how a little stereotypical it was, that of course the ugly girl was the villain and the beautiful girl was the good guy. You could dive into that if you want to. I don't really want to, so I'll just throw that out there. It's something you can comment on, and we can discuss that on the social media site a little bit more if you want to go into that a little bit. But I will say at the end there, of course, too, it was that moment where Diana was about to kill Dr. Poison, and she had that moment where she had to remember not just that the fact that these people are bad, but they can also be good, remembering Steve and the people she has met along the way, which gives us a nice segue into Steve's men, the men he recruits to help him and Diana take down Ares, so to speak. And again, I'm going to draw comparisons to Captain America, the First Avenger, because the Howling Commandos they had in the First Avenger was a melting pot of different ethnicities and backgrounds. Okay, you had Steve and you had Bucky, white boys, okay? But then you had your black guy, you had your Frenchman, you had your Asian, you had your American tough guy. You had just, a bunch of variety of different people. And this one group of people is no better. You had Samir, obviously. You had Charlie, who was the Irishman. And then you had the Chief, which no need to say what ethnicity that is. But again, just getting the different varieties. And it's kind of similar to how, going all the way back to Star Wars, you have the Empire, which was mainly men, mainly all dressed the same. They all looked the same. They were all white guys. Going over to the Rebellion, where you had, different species and genders and stuff like that. Again, trying to portray, that, diversity is the better way to go, or even, diversity are the good guys in that respect. At least that's what I get from it. I liked what they were trying to do with that Charlie character too, where they this is a guy who's seen some bad stuff. It's a traumatic experience where he's still trying to deal with it. I felt like they were going to go a little bit more into that, but they didn't. I felt like he was going to have that moment where he either, pulls off the shot to save someone, or he sacrifices himself to save the team, something like that, something to, show that he is over that hurdle of, the trauma of war or a life of war. All right, so then rounding out the cast is Steve's secretary. What's her name? Where is it at? Etta. Etta, played by Lucy Davis. Now, when I first looked her up, I looked it up, and she was actually on one of my favorite shows which only had one season, but it was an Aaron Sorkin show called Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip. It had Matthew Perry and Bradley Whitford on it, which if you haven't seen it, it's one season long. It's good stuff. Go check it out. And she was the character on that for that season, which I thought was cool. She was obviously there for comic relief. From the trailers, her stuff was the stuff that didn't work for me, honestly, in the trailers, because she was a character that you obviously were there just to make jokes. Now, you can say that, compared to Marvel films or Star Wars films or whatever you want to do. In the context of the film, I thought she was okay, though. The trailers didn't work for me, but adding her in the film, I thought she did fine. She wasn't overused, in my opinion, so in that respect, I think it was fine. In regards to the jokes, one thing about Batman v Superman was it was a very dark and dour film. Same thing can be said for Man of Steel. And some people have criticized Marvel for having too many jokes. I like that they added the jokes to this film, but they weren't overused. They were used properly and in the right moments. Going back to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, one of my complaints about that film was that they didn't let the dramatic moments stay dramatic. Like there were scenes where something dire had happened, and immediately I was like, okay, there's the joke, to break the tension. They couldn't just let it lie. In this film, they let it lie, they let it go, they let dramatic parts soak in. They didn't add a joke to try to break the tension. They let you feel, again, that word feel, what Diana was going through. It worked. It worked, and going back to the journey that Diana went on, the fish out of water, the view of humanity and what changed, it just worked with the film. And I gotta say, I liked it. I liked this film, guys. I recommend going and seeing it. I'm gonna go see it twice. I haven't seen a film twice in theaters since Rogue One, I think, which for me is, a long time. If I really like a movie and I really try to watch it at least twice, and a Star Wars movie was obviously I'm going to go see twice. What was the last time I saw a movie that wasn't Star Wars twice? Oh, Civil War. Yeah, I saw Civil War twice. Okay, so I'll give you that. But again, just goes to show you the fact that I wasn't super excited about this movie, and now I want to go see it again, I think shows you the level that we're dealing with here. I mean, I'm sorry, I cannot understate what this means for Warner Brothers and, superhero films and the DCEU. Because now I feel like Warner Brothers needs to realize they need to let the directors direct the film. Batman v Superman, what Zack Snyder wanted to do, that 3.5 hour long movie he wanted to make, was great. They should have left it in there. Sure, it would have been longer. You wouldn't have had as many showings in their movies or in the theaters, but it would have been a better film. So I think I would have gone back probably 3 times to see it if they would have left the ultimate cut as the theatrical cut. Same thing with David Ayer. I trust David Ayer. I trust he would have made a good movie. The studio stepped in, took the film away from him, had some trailer company finish off the film, which was a mistake, a huge mistake in my opinion. I have no doubt in my mind that would have been a better quality film if they simply would have trusted the director to do their job and tell a story. With this one, Patty Jenkins, I felt like they really let her just do it. The film had a singular vision, unlike Suicide Squad or Batman v Superman, that you could tell were committee films that were a bunch of people trying to get their opinion in there, and they just meshed it all together, and it was a big blob of mess. This one was a clear-cut, singular vision, like most films should be. You can say that, duo directing that the Russo brothers do. They've been together for years. They trust each other. They both are on the same page. When you add too many cooks in the kitchen, your dinner's going to end up looking like crap. I'm sorry, but this one I felt so different from what we've gotten from the DCEU so far, and it's that singular vision, I'm sorry, of Patty Jenkins. I'm going to keep giving her the credit for it. Now, whether they let back and just trusted her, or whether she demanded that trust from the get-go in her contract, I don't know, but It was an enjoyable film. It had a great message, gives you a lot of deep thoughts as far as humanity, and just overall very enjoyable. Very, very enjoyable. I don't recommend it for younger kids. Like, I'm not going to show my 4-year-old daughter this, but definitely, 12, 13 years old, I recommend taking them on, to see it. And I would not be surprised if it was still number one coming out this next weekend against The Mummy. I would, say that it's probably going to be number one because word of mouth. It's getting nothing but good reviews, so I'm all for it. I'm definitely all for this film. I'm now officially, more anxious and less worried for Justice League, especially, of course, now with Justice League, the fact that Joss Whedon, who, I worship at the altar of Joss Whedon, is coming in to finish the film. And again, Zack Snyder, I had my worries about Zack Snyder until I saw the ultimate cut of Batman v Superman, saw what his true vision was for that film. I gave him a little more slack, and I kind of quit cursing his name for Man of Steel. But I trusted him a little more with Justice League, and now that Joss Whedon, someone who I completely trust, is, taking the ship the rest of the way, I am a little less worried for Justice League, and I'm sure that if Warner Brothers knew what was good for them, they would get Patty Jenkins involved in more of their films. I think that's it, guys. I'm running at 51 minutes, and, I could go on and talk about a few other things, but I think I'm going to leave it at that. I know once Lisa sees that I have done a Wonder Woman review without her, she's going to be super upset at me, but I had no time to fit it in this week with her, so I'm sure next week she's going to throw in her 2 cents, so you can hear the woman's perspective of all of this on next week's show, hopefully, given, time constraints and how schedules go and stuff like that. But that's going to be it, guys. So, moral of the story, go see Wonder Woman. It was an enjoyable film. It had its flaws. Most films do, but it was, I think a tremendous step forward for Warner Brothers and the DC Cinematic Universe and female superheroes as well. I was pleasantly surprised by it. So go see it if you haven't already, because if you haven't already, I just spoiled everything for you. Sorry. That's going to be it, guys. So now here's what you have to do. You have to jump on Facebook group, Twitter, dayspringdiscussions@gmail.com. Let me know what you think. I want to know what you think. Did you agree with me? Did you feel Gal Gadot did a good job? Did you feel okay about them taking out the Greek gods completely in this film? Did the twist of the villain at the end, did it catch you by surprise? Because it didn't me at all, obviously. But let me know, okay? Again, Facebook group, find us, Twitter, dayspringdiscussions@gmail.com. You can find me personally on Instagram and on Twitter, Slim, SLYM, Dayspring12. Guys, we're going to be back next week with hopefully a regular show, regular topics, regular format, and I'm hopefully going to have a co-host. I don't know if it'd be Lisa, but I'll try to get someone else in here because, like I said, I feel like I ramble on and don't do a good job doing solo acts, but if you want to, give me compliments or give me critiques, I'm open to those as well. So until next time, guys, may the force be with us all.